how wearing socks determines your success to a point. In this video, I'm going to teach you about or show you and tell you about how I got my autistic son to wear socks using human psychology and how you can then take that into the world and really just write your own ticket. So let's get started. So basically, my son, Oscar, who's 6, has what they call level 2 autism, which basically means he's intelligent as they come, but socially pretty, not the best. So, and people who have children who are autistic will actually get this. Them wearing clothes, especially things like socks, which have a seam in them or a kind of coarse to wear, is a nightmare. It is an absolute nightmare to get them to wear, clothing like that. It's an argument, and no matter how much you reason with them, it just doesn't work. So he wouldn't wear socks because those socks would because there was a seam in the middle of them. They were coarse. They rub against his skin, and it was a literal nightmare to try and get him to wear socks every single day. He refused to wear them. I think for about 6 months in kinder, he didn't wear socks at all with his shoes, with his sneakers. It was literally horrible. And in those moments, what you tend to do is use logic. You try and say things like, "It will keep your feet warm." Your shoes won't smell. It'll stop you from getting infection in your feet. It'll keep your feet clean, and you'll come with all the logical reasons as to why socks are beneficial to wear inside your shoes. Now, this is where the human behavior part works very, very, very well. If you understand how humans work, we are dopamine machines. We are reward machines. And understanding logic and saying to Oscar facts and figures about why socks are important is not going to get him to wear socks. Neither does it work for humans in any great detail that if we throw facts and figures at people, they still don't make the change. So, for example, we could say a certain percentage of people who are obese will have this much increase in heart disease. We know the statistics. We know that increased weight and alcohol and all that kind of stuff and bad eating McDonald's causes us to have a shorter life. We can throw statistics at it, but people still don't do it. It's because we make decisions as humans based on an emotional and dopamine need or feeling. So when I'm throwing all these facts and figures, or Vanessa and I were doing it with Oscar and saying, these are the reasons why you should wear socks, it was never going to happen. So what we did was used what we, in the human behavior space is reward-based stuff, right? We understand what's Oscar's motivation. We have to use an emotional motivation inside of him that gets him to wear socks. So on a Friday at school, we have what's called walk run, where the kids run laps of the school and they get tickets to say how many laps they've run, and they get a leaderboard at school to put where they're coming on the leaderboard. And then on Saturday mornings, Oscar does little athletics at down here in Berwick. And he would usually come middle of the field. What would happen when he come middle of the field, he would stop, he would start crying, and then stop altogether. I'd have to then go in there and then run with him to the end. He'd be bawling his eyes out because he was coming 4th or 5th. So what we understood there is that one of Oscar's greatest motivators from a brain perspective or human behavior perspective is winning. And kids who have autism and stuff like that tend to have that's a big thing for them. So we understood that, well, Oscar responds well to coming first or second and third in certain things. So if he was able to get more tickets in his walk run or becoming the first 2 or 3, then he actually responded really well to that. So what we did was say, instead of going with logic and stats and facts and figures about why socks are important, we said, maybe, Oscar, the reason why you've got an issue with the walk run and little athletics is because your foot in your shoe is slipping and you can't run that fast when your foot is slipping inside your shoe. So the problem you've got, Oscar, is there's too much room in your shoe that's not allowing you to run as fast as everybody else. And so, but the solution for that, buddy, is to wear some socks. And because he associated wearing socks with performing better in the walk run and getting more tickets and getting up the leaderboard, and then at Little Athletics, not coming fifth or sixth, becoming 1, 2, or 3, he immediately put socks on one morning. And at that walk run, whether it was placebo effect or whatever, he ran 6 laps that morning. And he got 6 tickets, the best he's ever done. Come up, usually he's crying. Now he's coming up, jumping up and down. He's happy. He's enthusiastic. Look, Dad, look what my socks did. I was able to run faster. I got 6 tickets. And then he's coming up the leaderboard in the walk run at school. And then the next day at Little Athletics, he came second in the race in the 100-meter sprint. He hadn't done that before. And he was jumping up and down. He was happy. Look, Dad, my socks, they make me run faster. And that has been sheer gold. We've gone from a child who would not wear socks anywhere to a child now that will wear socks no matter what, if they've got a seam in them or not. And, as I said before, for people who have got children with a little bit of autism, they know how hard it is to try and get kids to do that stuff. So if you can and toddlers are the best, right? Toddlers are great because if you can break through a toddler, and you can break through their mind, you can pretty much break through anybody. But what I'm trying to say here, and the story about this is that whether it's Oscar or anybody else, you have to understand what drives people, how people change, what motivates people. And without knowing that, you can throw a million facts and figures at people and they will not make change. For example, in the fintech space, you've got 87% of businesses say that leadership is one of the number one problems company-wide, and they must invest in leadership in the next 3 years to make any progress as an organization. 13% of companies do that. The statistics are out there as far as enabling emotional intelligence, self-awareness, understanding human behavior is the number one skill you can have across the board, not only in work, but in your relationships, and it's also a direct correlation to your wealth. So, and again, you look at McKinsey and all that kind of stuff, and Gartner, and you look at all the the billionaires out there, and they'll say the same thing. The number one skill set across the board for them is understanding how humans perform. Yet, especially in the fintech space, you'll go and do more systems. You'll go and do more processes. You'll go and learn more about ChatGPT or AI or whatever new trick that you can use is more about logic. But the real key to your wealth, and wealth as far as financial goes, happiness goes, fulfillment goes, peace goes, relationships, intimacy, across the board, it will never change. The ability to understand what drives human beings, how they operate, and how to influence and leverage that is a skill set that if you don't have it, you'll never, ever be able to have that freedom of wealth that you're looking for, especially financially. So take the lesson from Oscar in this space, is that we were able to leverage and influence him based on his reward and dopamine because we understood that that's what gave him happiness. So we used and leveraged that to say, hey, if you want to get this, the missing component is the socks. It's not the shoes or the faster shoes or the shoes with spikes on them. It's the part that actually, what you think is the problem is not necessarily the problem. It's this part over here. And when I say to people right now, especially with the AI stuff coming out, a lot of people are trying to learn more and more and more about technical skills. And I get that. But the real people who are 10 years, 5 years ahead of the game, they're jumping on human behavior now because they understand that the number one game in the whole world, and always will be, and always has been, and AI is learning this stuff, is the ability to understand human behavior, understand self-awareness, emotional intelligence, influence, leverage, and intuition. If you understand that stuff, then you've got something that very, very few people have, and you're in that one space. So understanding how to actually leverage human behavior in a way that it's not about trying to con people or manipulate people. It's about using it for good. and you can do that. So, which we did with Oscar, right? Now we wear socks everywhere. So, the important thing to understand is that understanding the way that people operate and the way to understand how people are driven is really, really important. And if you understand the way that people are driven from an emotional state and a dopamine state, because we think we have choice, we think we have free will in life. We don't. We are emotional beings where we make decisions based on emotional things, usually driven from a place of dopamine. And when you start to understand that, you'll start to understand some of the choices and decisions you're making in life aren't even your choice. They're being put there by people who are trying to influence you to make a decision, and you're completely unaware of it. And where the real trick comes is once you're aware of that, you can then unplug from, okay, right, now I understand why I was doing that, because I was driven from these people who social media is doing it all the time. It's great. But anyway, so I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you understand that, the real leverage you've got going forward is somebody who's going to be incredibly successful and incredibly wealthy, financially, emotionally, freedom, all that kind of stuff, comes down to one thing and one thing only: the ability to understand human psychology. And that is a skill set that if you're not jumping on now, you're going to be sort of in a place where, what do I do next? Because AI is going to take the place of a lot of jobs. But the one thing AI can't replace is the ability to be and understand humans. So I'll catch you in the next video. See you later.